If you want to become a psychophysiologist, this is what you have to do. First of all, learn English. Second, learn the following off by heart. Before you give up and resign a study, you must first design. You must balance each condition, so to understand cognition, stimuli in fast succession, paradigm at your discretion. Find a subject, pay him fair, chain him to the dentist chair, stick gel, stick well, electrodes on the head guard, suck the signals from his brain, measure him again and again. Grey brain, white brain, left brain, right brain, split brain, fit brain, I'm in the ship brain, pea brain, flea brain, thick brain, sick brain, super brain, water brain, this is driving me insane, stimulate, activate 100 Hz sampling rate, average your waveform, do a Wood-McCarthy norm, be a freak, seek the peak, take a break and have a leak.
My first impression of Marta came when I applied for a position in her lab in June 1998. We exchanged emails, and after some preliminaries, it went like this. Hi, I think it would be great to have you here. So, if you'd like to come, I'd like to have you. We can work out the details. MK. I joined the lab in the following fall of 1998, and she was right. It was great to be in the lab. So my first impression of Marta was clear, direct, carefully chosen words, and she got it right. How did that change over the next 24 years? It didn't.
I first met Marta when I came to interview, and then Marta picked me up, and she was just very, just like Marta, very genuine, very warm, but you could tell she wasn't saying, she wouldn't say what you wanted her to say. She said what she believed, and so it made me feel much more relaxed, and she just made me feel very welcome. Yeah, it's a nice way to meet her. And then later, I guess after my talk, I went out to dinner, and there were several faculty members in the car going to dinner. Liz Bates's NIH grant had just been reviewed, but she didn't have the results yet, and she was, she was basically nervous, and she was saying, my life has been decided, but I don't know what it is yet. And Marta said, not your life, just a grant, which I thought was very, very healthy attitude.
So it was November 1977, and I was home in San Diego visiting my family for Thanksgiving with my new graduate advisor, Vic Johnson. I'd only been a grad student for 3 months. I'd barely just been introduced to ERPs, really didn't know that much about them yet. And he wanted to visit the Hilliard lab and actually give Hilliard a piece of his mind, because I think he thought Hilliard had been involved in rejecting some of his papers. But anyway, I went with him to the old basic science building on the UCSD campus, and we found our way to the Hilliard lab, and Hilliard wasn't there. In fact, there was no one there except Marta. And I didn't know Marta at the time, but Vic knew her through a former grad student of his. And he and Marta started in talking about things, and they became very animated, talking about some data that Marta had collected and was puzzling over. So this is, like I said, November 1977. I didn't know what they were talking about. I was, like I said, a new grad student, had no clue really about what they were so excited about and what they were trying to figure out. Of course, in retrospect, this was the N400. This is, a few years before the first publication, and Marta was extremely excited, and Vic, my advisor, was extremely excited about these data. And of course, I only became excited about them years later when I finally learned about the N400. And of course, the rest is history.
I remember meeting Marta when I interviewed at CogSci, and I thought that she thought that I was wasting her time. However, she was totally patient, listened to what I thought I was interested in, and gave me some papers to read. But I was a little scared of her after that. However, the experience of going through the second-year project totally transformed how I understood Marta. Seeing her mentor a bunch of anxious green grad students, I saw what a big, ginormous heart Marta has, how much she really cared about all of us, and how much she wanted us to all succeed, not just in science, but in life in general.
So first of all, at first sight, Marta seems to be very cold and does not seem to be approachable. And especially if you got to know her through the critical and hard questions she asks to the speakers in the department seminars. But actually, those were the times when I thought that this is how a cognitive scientist should be. I was always amazed by the fact that even she was not an expert in the field, she quickly grasped the subject and could ask fundamental questions to the speakers. And I remember that I told myself, this is how I want to be when I grow up in science. She was really a model for me.
When I was trying to find desperately some job during the recession, after, it was pretty much winding up the dissertation, I actually did contact Marta, who kind of remembered me, thought I seemed okay, asked Sima, who said I was like the only person at Carnegie Mellon worth anything. That's how I ended up coming to UCSD. And the first day I arrived at UCSD, the night before, we had just gotten into San Diego and had been actually camping out in a campground in Santee. And I'm sure it looked really great, as one does when you wake up in Santee. So I burst into the lab and, look around and see Marta. Marta says, hello. And I say, hi, I'm John King. We just got here. We don't have a place to live yet. Remember, the internet didn't exist in 1988. What should I do? She said, well, tell you what, find a place to live, and when you get your shit together, let's talk next week. And of course, by this time I was already just looking down at her shoes because eye contact never a big thing for me. But I realized, okay, that's a good idea. Let me do that. And so we did. And that was wonderful because that was the beginning of, really some of the best years of my life, doing all kinds of cool new stuff, things never done before in cognitive neuroscience at UCSD.
One of my early memories of Marta comes from when I was beginning to run subjects for what would be my first ERP experiment in the lab. And so one of those early subjects did not go well. I had a session where I couldn't get the impedances down, channels were blocking and drifting, maybe stim press crashed, maybe I forgot to press record, that kind of thing. So after the session was over and I was sitting in the lab feeling, pretty discouraged, at some point, Marta came out of her office and walked by and looked at me and said, oh, I noticed you had a subject earlier. How did that go? And so I started listing the things that had gone wrong. And when I paused, she, without missing a beat, said, great. And I was very taken aback and said something like, but I didn't get any usable data. And she said, well, that's why we do pilots, right? We do them so that we'll find all the problems and we'll make all the mistakes and then we can do them better next time. And she went on to say that in her experience, often it was the experiments that were a bit of a disaster at the beginning that turned out to be the best ones later on.
Well, I can't say that my impression of Marta changed that much because I somehow intuitively got Marta from the get-go. So I think a lot of people are intimidated by Marta and are a little bit afraid of her at first. I never really was, but what I did learn over time is that Marta is actually a real softie because Marta has like a huge heart. She's incredibly generous and really, on some levels, just really, really a tender human being. And that's one of the things I've always loved about her. So I'm always astonished that people can't figure that out as quickly as I did. Maybe I was just fortunate, but that's who Marta really is.
I remember Ken Baldwin, who was one of her grad students, said, oh, she has a gruff exterior, but actually she's really sweet. And when I first said that, I was kind of skeptical. But then after I got to know her, I was like, oh, it's true. Because the thing about Marta is that she has to be gruff because when people find out how incredibly giving she is, they often will take advantage of it.
As I got to know Marta, I realized that she was a very multidimensional human and that there was no way that I would ever truly know Marta, but that the beauty of Marta is that she is 100% authentic. So whatever those multi-dimensions are, you need to know that none of them are actually obfuscating the beauty of Marta.
Well, well, John, get your shit together, was about, kind of where it hung out as a steady state. No, we actually, what did change was my realization is sort of how important she was to like a whole bunch of people. We would have a constant stream of visitors through the lab from all sorts, some of the most amazing scientists I ever met, particularly people she knew from Europe and what have you. And the one thing that changed is I sort of didn't realize how important she was in the field and to so many other people, and she knew everybody. And that was the thing that I think that changed the most. But again, the thing that most changed was, the feelings of kindness and, basically making us all feel comfortable, all of us throughout the lab. There were seemingly dozens at a time sometimes, was the great thing. But what I didn't know is like literally how important she was to so many other people. That was the big change.
And I really respected, not only, your strong will and tell like I see it mentality, but the deep well of caring that it stemmed from. And this is a lesson, again, that I tried to carry forward and emulate in my own small way as head of my own lab. You were one of my earliest scientific role models, and I feel greatly privileged to have been in your orbit, even if only for a couple years and now a long time ago. I'll always remember that period of my life with extreme fondness because of how it shaped me as a scientist and as a thinker.
I blink in sync, covers up the missing link, rejected, corrected, otherwise neglected, correlate, investigate, never not be up to date, follow up, write it up, replicate, and don't be late. Pea brain, flea brain, thick brain, sick brain, super brain, water brain, this is driving me insane. Grey brain, white brain, left brain, right brain, split brain, fit brain, I'm in the shit brain. EEG, ERP, P3 and CNV, FFT and CST, less for you and more for me. PINV, stop off for a cup of tea. Poster, lecture, conference, conjecture. Ah, you're going to a conference? Well, you better practice your English. Okay. The pain in the brain comes mainly from the sprain. The locus of the focus, the ulcus in the sulcus. No, you must do better than that. The pain in the brain comes mainly from the sprain. The locus of the focus is the ulcus in the sulcus, okay?
What have I learned from Marta? Okay, so one thing I learned from her is that if you ask, should I do X with the data or should I do Y with the data? She always says, you should do both things. And I found that to be like the best advice ever, is to just don't limit yourself, explore the data, and find out what it has to tell you. You can always sort it out later.
I've learned many lessons from Marta about science and life in general, but one really fundamental lesson was that she showed me that you can be a good person and still succeed in your career. Marta has done solid, replicated, high-impact research while being a model mentor and a fundamentally decent, kind person. Throughout my own career, it's been so encouraging to know that success can come to those who really deserve it, and I see Marta as a great role model. Science and the world in general would be a better place if people were more like Marta.
I think what Marta taught me was to work hard but still have a healthy work-life balance. She also personally told me write less grants and write more papers, which I think was very useful at the time. That was, I think, when I was going up for promotion. And you could tell over the years Marta's strong devotion to cognitive science, the department, the field, and the faculty within. So even if she didn't necessarily agree with you, she would go to bat for you in the strongest manner within the university. And she also was a strong proponent of cognitive science as a field and interdisciplinary education for our students.
The one thing I really learned from Marta was just keep doing what you're doing. Because doing something is always better than doing nothing. And I took that to heart, actually. She told me that when I came to her pre-tenure and I was very concerned. And I was trying to figure out whether I should change my directions, whether I should do something different. And she said, no, just keep doing what you're doing. And I thought, okay, just keep making progress. Just keep doing what you're doing. And that, and I was doing work just to get that in there. So that made sense. And I kept that with me, and I actually gave that advice to others too.
My favorite Marta story is from when I was a grad student. So the Society for Neuroscience was going to be having their big annual meeting in San Diego. And I knew a bunch of people that were going. And so I said to Marta, can I have $50? And she looks at me and she goes, what for? And I go, for beer. And so she reaches into her pocket and she pulls out like a crumpled set of bills. I mean, like, who has $50 on them in cash? Of course, this was like before Venmo and everything, so people were more inclined to have cash. But I was wowed that she had $50. And then she just hands it to me. And I go, well, actually, it's for Society for Neuroscience. And she like reaches out and she grabs the money back. And I go, no, it's for beer. She's like, okay, you can have it then.
But I was at a CRL meeting. I had just joined CRL. I just moved my grant from communication to this ORU. And I was attending a ORU management meeting. And I can't remember the issue, it doesn't matter, but you and I had a disagreement. I was probably pounding the table, very determined to make my point of view, heard my view, and I think we didn't completely resolve it. But a few hours later, I got a poem that you had written, you sent to my email, and I thought, wow, this is really such empathy, such compassion. And it's the lesson I've learned about leadership, that there always has to be room to reach out to someone, thank them, appreciate their point of view. I can't write a poem the way you can, but that lesson has stayed with me ever since. So thank you for that.
So I have a lot of fond memories of Marta, but there's one story I want to bring up here because I want to know if it's actually true or if I misremembered it. So what I remember is that a bunch of us were sitting around talking, and Marta mentioned that she used to work as a cook and learned to crack four eggs at a time with both hands. I've been trying to learn to crack one egg with one hand, and it's a mess. But I'm sure that with practice, a human could learn to crack 2 eggs at a time with 2 hands. 4 eggs at a time, however, seems superhuman, which is why I question my memory. However, it's Marta, so I think she could actually do it. So, Marta, can you actually do 4 eggs? Let me know.
Do I have any good Marta stories? I have a lot of Marta stories, but they all just sort of merge into one Marta. And that is that you can always count on Marta to say exactly what she's thinking. So if you can just imagine what Marta would be thinking in any scenario, then you can always give a little giggle because you think, oh, I know what Marta's going to say to that. So actually, that's my favorite Marta story, is the internal joy that I get in any scenario from thinking about exactly what Marta would say about that.
One episode stands out as really shifting my thinking, and it happened early in my time in the lab. We'd finished our first project. It was actually on memory, and Marta said, well, this is interesting, and I don't think it's been done. Why don't you send it to psychological science? And I thought, whoa, okay, if you think. And in due course, the reviews came back, and I went back to Marta and said, well, yeah, so we heard back from Psych Science. One of the reviews was pretty positive, and the other was pretty negative, and the editor went with the negative review, and she says, well, why? And I said, I think they might have missed the point. And she says, well, why don't you write the editor? You want me to write James Cutting, editor-in-chief of Psychological Science, and say he missed the point? She says, clear, courteously, but just explain it. Okay. I didn't know that was a thing. So I type as clear a courteous email as I can to James Cutting. He sends back, well, I think you might be right. So I took another look at it. And if you can address the first reviewer's concerns and do the additional analyses, we'll reconsider it. And I did, they did, and it ended up getting published. And that was a real revelation. And it doesn't matter who you are, who they are, it's about getting things right.
One of my favorite ways to interact with Marta is at a party. And I really enjoyed all of the sort of CogSci holiday parties, end of the year parties, and sort of recruitment event parties that we got to have as a department, where Marta really did an amazing job as a department chair, kind of making us feel like a whole, like a family, like a community. And one of the ways she did that was by asking us at each of these events at various points to remember to swizzle, which is, Marta's way of saying, go actually talk to someone else that you don't necessarily know as well. And Marta was very big always on asking us to engage in this way and actually meet people face to face and have conversations with them as humans, to go beyond just being scientists and colleagues to actually being friends and humans with each other. So I'm very grateful to Marta for reminding us that it's okay to be human as a scientist.
Marta certainly has given a lot of time and energy to her students and the department, to the university, and to the field. She always said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And she always did what was necessary to do things well. But Marta also always said, it's only worth doing if it brings you joy, if it's meaningful in some way. And that was one of the reasons that Marta was always a role model for me, is that even though she worked very hard and was successful in all the ways one might want to be successful, she always made it clear that science and that her career, that those kind of things are in the service of a meaningful life, not the other way around. And so, particularly since Marta has been talking about retiring, literally since I was in the lab more than 20 years ago, I think she's had time to wrap her head around this. And I have no doubt that she'll continue to find those things that she considers meaningful and joyful, and that she'll continue to do them well, and that we'll all just have the pleasure of finding out what those things are. So congratulations, Marta, and all the best, always.
Okay, wishes for the next chapter. Well, Marta, since the last 40 years have pretty much been about everybody else and helping everyone else achieve their goals, I hope that you can take some time and focus on yourself. And I look forward to reading your poetry and hopefully attending salons at your house.
So I don't presume to give Marta any advice, but I do wish her, she very much deserves a nice, relaxing retirement. Selfishly, I hope she still keeps in touch and answers our email and helps us out. But I hope that she has a very nice, relaxing retirement. She definitely definitely deserves it.
So thank you, Marta, for everything. I wish you all the best in your retirement, and I'm excited to hear about your next chapter. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I hope that your party and all the mementos that you're getting from people that you've positively influenced over the years bring you great joy and memories. And with that, I'll say goodbye.
I only wish Marta one thing, and that is that she finds as many ways and many opportunities as possible for joy after retirement. And whether that comes in the form of continuing to look at some electrical brain potentials, or whether that comes in the form of walking along the beaches of San Diego, or whether that comes in the form of sitting outside on a sunny day in a garden, I hope you find joy, and I hope that you continue to write poetry and share it with us.
Marta, as you move to your next chapter, I want to give you a heartfelt thanks, actually, for the warmth and caring and absolute enormous amount of work that you've put into everything you've done and that you've given to every single one of us. And I think my advice to you is move on, is take that energy and put it into what you want to do 100% and into your passions and what you would love to see happen. And throw those lists away and keep your bucket list and keep going on that. And I can't wait to see what your next creative venture is. So keep us with you and know that we love you. And thank you for all the love and warmth and intellect and hard work that you've given all of us.
Now, this is what you do at conferences. First think, at least some of you do, then take a deep breath. Congregate, communicate, illuminate, pontificate, intimidate and ruminate, elaborate, gesticulate, vociferate, exaggerate, reiterate and postulate, substantiate and educate, negotiate, congratulate, and then in the break, masticate, intoxicate, I bet you ate, glutamate, exhilarate and titillate, violate, intimate, adulterate and copulate, fornicate, recuperate. Well, maybe that was wishful thinking. Then back to the conference. Cooperate, evaluate, associate, infuriate, affiliate, insinuate, repudiate, and contemplate, assimilate, interrogate, consolidate, collaborate, calculate, and understate, expostulate in hot debate. Tit brain, bit brain, bat brain, fat brain, floppy brain, soppy brain, singing in the rain brain, lame brain, tame brain, think brain, shrink brain, cupid brain, stupid brain. Come and join the brain drain, and don't forget the dipoles. R's a, B's a, analyze a seizure. It's a doddle with this model guaranteed to please you. Localize the dipole source, analyze its time course. Put it in the MRI, don't stop to wonder why. Grey matter, white matter, former latter. Does it matter? Think it's in the limbic tract, or is it just an artifact? Shift it up a little higher, see how all those neurons fire. Move the dipole to the right, work on it throughout the night. Get the data down to size, you're ready for the Nobel Prize. Lame brain, tame brain, think brain, shrink brain, cupid brain, stupid brain. Come and join the brain drain. Tit brain, bit brain, bat brain, fat brain, floppy brain, soppy brain. Singing in the rain brain, grey brain, white brain, left brain, right brain, split brain, fit brain. I'm in the shit brain, pea brain, flea brain, thick brain, sick brain, super brain, water brain. This is driving me insane. Now we've come a long way, so that is all I have to say. And tomorrow we will continue with the MEG, with particular emphasis on the minimum norm, and we'll also do some fMRI.